The afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus's architecture firm, casting long shadows across his desk. He had been reviewing blueprints for a new residential complex when his phone buzzed with a notification from the family laptop, a message preview that made his stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you tonight, Elaine." It wasn't the message itself that shattered him. It was the name attached to the contact, David. Marcus had known Elaine for 19 years. They had met in college when he was designing his first amateur project and she was studying literature. She had watched him sketch bridges and buildings, and somewhere between his dreams and her encouragement, they had decided to build something together. A marriage, 2 children, a life. The phone fell from his hand. For several minutes, Marcus sat in perfect stillness, his mind refusing to process what he had seen. Perhaps he had misread it. Perhaps there was an explanation. But even as he reached for these fragile possibilities, another message arrived, and then another. They painted a picture that was unmistakable and devastating. He didn't confront Elaine that evening. Instead, he made dinner for the family, chicken pasta and fresh salad, and sat through the meal watching his wife's face, searching for signs of the woman he thought he knew. She seemed normal. She smiled at their younger daughter Sophie when she described her school project. She asked their son Ryan about his architecture competition. She commented that the pasta was good. She was a stranger. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He moved to the guest room and lay in the darkness, his mind fragmenting into sharp questions. How long had this been happening? Where had they met? When did Ryan find out? That last question cut deepest. Ryan, his 17-year-old son who was supposed to be applying to architecture programs, who had told his father just months ago that he wanted to follow in his footsteps. The next morning, Marcus didn't go to the office. Instead, when Ryan left for school, he intercepted him. "We need to talk," Marcus said simply, gesturing to the car. They sat in the driveway, and Marcus showed his son the messages. He didn't yell, he didn't demand explanations immediately. He simply said, "Help me understand why my son would lie to my face." Ryan's face crumpled. The boy tried to explain, something about his mother being sad, about her saying that his father didn't understand her, about how she had asked him to keep it secret just until she figured things out. The words tumbled over each other, desperate and hollow. "Your mother asked you to betray your family," Marcus said quietly, "and you agreed." The weight of that statement settled between them. Marcus was devastated, but something unexpected sparked within him. Not revenge in the traditional sense, but a determination to use this crisis as a catalyst. His children had been raised in a home where ethics and integrity were supposed to mean something. Ryan's college fund had been carefully cultivated over 17 years, money meant to launch his future. But right now, his son needed to learn a different kind of education. "Your scholarship fund," Marcus said, "will be redirected. We're going to work together on something real. And through that work, you're going to understand what it means to earn trust again, and what your choices cost." Ryan started to protest, but Marcus held up his hand. Not as punishment, as education. That evening, Marcus finally confronted Elaine. They spoke in the kitchen after the children were in bed, and though her words were apologetic, he could see the emptiness behind them. She was sorry about being caught, perhaps, but not yet sorry about the betrayal itself. "We'll need to figure out what happens next," Marcus said, "but right now I need to focus on being the parent our children deserve." He didn't know it yet, but the painful decision he had made to redirect his son's future towards understanding and responsibility rather than towards punishment would become the only bridge that could eventually carry his entire family from betrayal towards feeling. The weight of secrets, Marcus was learning, was lighter when it was shared with someone willing to help carry it.
The renovated warehouse on Maplewood Avenue would become a community center, a space for art classes, youth programs, and workshops. Marcus had won the bid 6 months ago, and the project had been scheduled to break ground right about now. Instead, he invited Ryan to become his apprentice. "I'm not a construction worker," Ryan said defensively when Marcus first explained the project. "I wanted to go to Columbia. I wanted to study design." "You will," Marcus replied. "But first, you're going to learn why integrity matters in every single thing we build, starting with this." The first week was grueling. Ryan worked alongside the crew, doing the unglamorous work of assessment and planning. He hauled materials, took measurements, and filled out the endless documentation that preceded any real construction. His hands developed blisters, his back ached. He came home exhausted and wanted to argue. But Marcus would sit with him in the evenings, and instead of lecturing, he would draw. He would sketch the building as it would be, explaining the principles behind each decision, not just the aesthetic choices, but the structural ones, the way certain decisions would affect who could access the space, how materials chosen with integrity lasted longer and served more people, how cutting corners might save money now, but created problems later that would ripple outward for years. "Design is ethics," Marcus would say, drawing another line. "Every choice you make as a designer affects real people. When you build something, when you plan something, you're making a promise to the people who will use it, and you can't break that promise." Ryan understood, slowly, that his father wasn't teaching him architecture in these moments. He was teaching him about consequence. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into the apprenticeship, Ryan made a genuine mistake. He had miscalculated the load-bearing capacity for one of the internal walls. It wasn't a malicious error, simply an oversight. But when Marcus discovered it, he didn't explode. Instead, he sat Ryan down and explained in detail what could have happened if this building had been completed with that error. People could have been hurt. A space meant to serve his community could have harmed it instead. "Mistakes happen," Marcus said, "but accountability comes from how we respond when we discover them. You found this, you reported it. Now we fix it together." Something shifted in Ryan that afternoon. It wasn't about the building anymore. He was beginning to see that his covering up his mother's affair was exactly this kind of structural failure. It seemed small at the time, a white lie, a way to avoid conflict, but it had weakened the entire foundation of trust that held their family together. And just like a building with a compromised foundation, the damage would spread. He started asking his father questions during their work, real questions about his life, his marriage, his disappointment. "How did you not know?" Ryan asked one evening as they reviewed plans. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then finally he said, "Love has blind spots. I trusted your mother. I believed she trusted me. And sometimes when people need to hide things, they get very good at hiding them. But that's not your fault, and it's not an excuse for you." "I feel terrible," admitted Ryan, "like I'm the reason everything broke." "No," Marcus said, "but your choices contributed. Understanding that, really understanding it, is the only way forward." As weeks turned into months, the warehouse transformed. Ryan transformed with it. He stopped resenting the work and started taking pride in it. He began offering suggestions for design improvements. He researched sustainable materials. He understood, finally, that by doing this work with integrity, he was actually serving other people, the families who would use the community center, the young people who would take classes there. One afternoon, a group of local kids came by to see the project. Marcus had invited them, wanting to show his son what they were building for. As Ryan explained the space to these young people, Marcus saw his son's face change. Ryan saw what his work meant to others. He saw that building something real required showing up with honesty day after day. That evening, Ryan asked his father if they could talk to his mother together, not to confront her, but to try to understand what had broken in the family before her betrayal. Marcus agreed. It was a difficult conversation, but it was the first honest one their family had had in months. Elaine was defensive at first, then quiet. She admitted that she had been unhappy, that she had made choices to avoid facing that unhappiness, and she saw clearly what those choices had cost. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at Ryan, for putting you in that position, for making you complicit." Ryan nodded. "And I'm sorry for going along with it. I should have told Dad." Marcus looked at his son and saw in that moment not a perfect person, but a person capable of growth and accountability. He reached out and squeezed Ryan's shoulder. The blueprint for the community center hung on their kitchen wall now, and everyone in the family understood that buildings were just one kind of structure you had to construct with care. Families were another.
Elaine spent most of her time in the house those days, watching from the periphery. The discovery of her affair, Ryan's transformation, and her own isolation had compressed her into a smaller version of herself. She moved through rooms like a ghost, present but somehow absent. She had taken a leave of absence from her job, partly because Marcus had suggested it, but mostly because she couldn't bear the pretense of normalcy anywhere. At work, she had been the smart, capable project manager. At home, she had been the betrayer. The dissonance was unbearable. Sophie, her younger daughter, had become quieter too. At 14, she understood that something fundamental had shifted in the family, though she didn't fully understand what. She no longer asked why her parents weren't sleeping in the same room or why dinners felt strained. She simply accommodated the new reality. But it was watching Marcus and Ryan that undid Elaine completely. She had expected her husband to become bitter, to weaponize his hurt into cruelty disguised as teaching. Instead, she watched him show their son something she had never experienced in her marriage: unconditional presence. Even in his disappointment, Marcus was choosing to build something with Ryan rather than destroy something. One morning, Elaine found herself in the kitchen at the same time Marcus was preparing lunch for his workday on the community center project. He was focused, efficient, and barely acknowledged her presence. "How is the project going?" she asked, her voice small. "Well," Marcus replied, "Ryan suggested we use reclaimed wood for the interior frames. It's sustainable, and it has character. He's thinking about people." The phrase cut her. He's thinking about people. Ryan had learned that from watching his father, and she had taught him the opposite, to think about hiding, about secrecy, about his own comfort. That afternoon, Elaine drove to the building site. She had never been there before. She parked across the street and watched. Ryan was on a ladder, measuring something. Marcus was pointing at a blueprint. They moved around each other with an ease that suggested they had developed a language together, a real connection. And she realized with sharp clarity that this was what she had gambled away. Not her marriage, but the possibility of genuine intimacy. She watched as several teenagers arrived, the ones Marcus had invited to share in the building. Ryan explained something to them, and they nodded, engaged. He was teaching. He was leading. He was becoming the person his father had always believed he could be. Elaine sat in her car and cried. For weeks, she had told herself that the affair was about her husband not understanding her, about missing passion, about wanting to feel alive. But sitting here, watching what he was capable of building with their son, while she sat at home, she understood the truth. The affair had been about her own emptiness. She had been running from herself, not from him. David, the man she had been involved with, had sent her a message the day after Marcus discovered everything. He had written something dismissive about the situation, something that made it clear he had never actually cared about her, only about the thrill of the secret, the transgression. She hadn't responded. She didn't need to. She could see clearly now what she had risked for someone who didn't even know her. One evening, Marcus came home to find Elaine waiting for him, not in an ambush, but simply sitting at the kitchen table, her face washed and clear. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Not about the logistics of what comes next, about what happened." They sat across from each other, and for the first time since the discovery, Elaine spoke honestly. "I was lonely. Not because you weren't there, but because I wasn't here. I wasn't present in my own life. And instead of examining that, instead of talking to you about it, I ran.
I let someone make me feel interesting because I couldn't make myself feel that way." Marcus listened without interrupting. "I've been watching you with Ryan, and I've been watching what we built together fall apart because I was too afraid to be honest. I thought secrets would protect me. Instead, they destroyed everything." "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "They did. I don't know if you could ever forgive me, but I need you to know that I understand now. What I did wasn't just an affair. It was a refusal to show up. For you, for the kids, for myself." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not ready to talk about rebuilding, but I'm glad you're finally being honest." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even hope. But it was a door opening, just slightly, and Elaine understood that this door could only be walked through slowly, with continuous honesty and accountability. That evening, Elaine went to Sophie's room and sat on the edge of her bed. Her younger daughter looked at her warily. "I owe you an explanation about what's been happening with your father and me." And she told her daughter, age appropriately, about making mistakes, about the importance of honesty, and about how people you love can hurt you sometimes, and that hurt is real, but it doesn't have to be permanent if everyone is willing to work. Sophie listened, and then she asked, "Does Dad still love you?" "I don't know," Elaine said honestly. "I hope so, but right now, I have to earn that." Life Lessons in Part 3. Understanding the roots of betrayal. Elaine's affair wasn't really about passion or connection. It was about avoiding herself. This teaches us that when we betray others, we are often running from something within ourselves. The necessity of ownership. Elaine's moment of understanding comes not when she explains her behavior, but when she stops explaining it and simply owns it. Accountability requires dropping the justifications. Watching others rebuild what we destroyed. Sometimes the most powerful wake-up call comes not from confrontation, but from witnessing what we have lost. Seeing Marcus and Ryan build trust is what finally breaks through Elaine's denial. Honesty as the beginning, not the end. Elaine's confession to her family is not the resolution, but the beginning of a long process of rebuilding. This teaches us that admitting fault is only the first step.
The family's meetings began awkwardly in Marcus's office after work hours. He had suggested they try family conversations with structure, scheduled, time-limited, focused on one issue at a time. It wasn't therapy exactly, though Marcus had found a therapist for himself and suggested one for Elaine. The first meeting was painful. Ryan explained how the secret had affected him, the stress of keeping it, the guilt, the way it had made him feel complicit in something he didn't agree with. Elaine listened without becoming defensive, which was progress. Marcus spoke about the betrayal, about the damage to his trust, but also about his commitment to understanding why people make harmful choices. "Understanding doesn't mean accepting," Marcus said carefully. "It means I'm willing to look at this without hatred." Sophie attended too, at Marcus's insistence. Their younger daughter had been largely invisible in the crisis, but she needed to understand what was happening in her own family. "I hate feeling like everything is broken," Sophie said quietly. "I don't want to choose between you. I just want my family back." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time they all felt the real cost of what had happened, not in terms of secrets or affairs, but in terms of the loss of simple, uncomplicated family belonging. After that first meeting, things began to shift gradually. Marcus started explaining the community center project to the whole family. He showed them the blueprints, explained the vision. Ryan talked about his work with genuine enthusiasm. And then Marcus did something unexpected. He asked Elaine to help. "You were always good at understanding what communities needed," Marcus said. "The project needs a curator for the arts programming. It's not construction, but it's real work." Elaine was shocked. She asked if he was sure, and he said he wasn't sure about many things, but he was sure that isolating her further wasn't going to help any of them heal.
So Elaine began attending the site, not as a guilty bystander, but as a contributor. She started researching arts programs, talking to local artists, developing curriculum ideas for the classes that would happen in the center. It was the first time she had engaged in purposeful work since the discovery, and slowly it began to give her a sense of role beyond the one who betrayed. One afternoon, as Ryan and Elaine worked together on sourcing art for the walls, Ryan asked her directly, "Did you love him, the person you were seeing?" Elaine considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I was using him to avoid myself. That's not love, it's self-deception." "Do you love Dad?" Ryan pressed. "Yes," Elaine said, "but I showed him the worst version of myself, and now I have to show him there's something better there, over and over again, until maybe he believes it." "That's going to take a long time," Ryan observed. "Yes," Elaine agreed, "it will." Marcus, overhearing this conversation from across the room, felt something shift in his own chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition that his wife was doing the hard work of accountability, not for absolution, but because she understood what she had damaged. One evening, Marcus asked Ryan to join him for dinner alone, just the two of them. They went to a restaurant near the building site, and over simple food, Marcus asked his son about his plans. "I've been researching schools, but I don't want to stop this, the work we're doing. Could I take a gap year, work on finishing the center with you, and then start at Columbia next year?" Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "You don't have to do that," he said. "The fund can be redirected back." "I don't want it redirected," Ryan interrupted. "I've learned more in the last few months than I would have in a semester, and I think Mom needs us to show her that families can rebuild, that trust can come back." Marcus reached across the table and held his son's hand. He asked, "When did you become so wise?" "You taught me," Ryan replied, "by showing me what integrity looks like." By the 4th month after the discovery, the family started having meals together again. Not easily, not without tension, but with a growing sense that they were all trying. Sophie started inviting friends over again, comfortable enough that her family wasn't in active crisis. Elaine and Marcus didn't touch beyond the occasional brief contact, but they began to look at each other with something other than hurt. One evening, as they sat finishing dinner, Marcus noticed that Elaine was looking at him, not with apology, that was constant, but with something like hope. "I don't know what we're doing," Marcus said carefully. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were." "We can't," Elaine agreed, "but we could go forward into something different, something more honest. That would require you to never hide from me again, not about anything." "I know," Elaine replied, "and I'm willing. But I also know that trust takes time, and I'll earn every moment of it." Marcus nodded. It wasn't a declaration of reconciliation, it was a commitment to the possibility of rebuilding, step by step, conversation by conversation, day by day.
The community center's ribbon-cutting ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in late spring. The building had taken longer than initially planned, but no one in the family minded. The extra time had allowed for more than construction, it had allowed for transformation. Ryan had designed the entry hallway himself, working with a local muralist to create a visual timeline of the neighborhood's history. Elaine had curated the art collection for the walls and helped design the curriculum for the youth programs. Marcus had overseen the entire construction, teaching his son and his wife the principles that underlay every beam and wall. The community turned out in force for the opening. Local officials gave speeches, artists performed, families toured the space, exploring the classrooms, the gallery, the performance area, and the family, Marcus, Elaine, Ryan, and Sophie, stood together, watching what they had built together. Sophie kept saying, "I can't believe we did this. We actually did this." And they had, not without struggle, not without difficulty, but together. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself alone with Elaine on the rooftop garden, another space Ryan had suggested and helped design. "We did good work," Elaine said, looking out at the city. "We did," Marcus agreed. For a moment they stood in silence. Then Marcus turned to her. "I've been thinking about what you said, about going forward into something different,
something more honest. Have you been thinking about it, or have you decided something? Elaine asked carefully. Both, Marcus said. I've been terrified that if we try again, you'll eventually hide from me, that we'll slip back into the patterns that let this happen in the first place. I know, Elaine said softly. But watching you these last months, Marcus continued, watching you show up, watching you choose honesty even when it's uncomfortable, watching you build something meaningful with our family, I think maybe we could try. But it would have to be different. It would have to be real. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. Do we try again? Marcus asked, his voice catching slightly. This time with nothing hidden, no secrets, no running, no pretense? Elaine nodded, unable to speak. She reached out and took his hand, a small gesture, but laden with meaning. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully. It was a commitment to the possibility of something real. Ryan and Sophie found them there a few moments later. Ryan understood, without needing explanation, what had happened. He put his arm around his mother's shoulders, and Sophie leaned against his father. They stood together, looking out at the city, at the building below them that represented not just community infrastructure, but the hard-won journey of a family learning to rebuild trust. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed and the family began to leave, Marcus gathered them together one more time in the performance space. I want to say something, he said, not as a father or a husband, but as a person. When I discovered the betrayal, I wanted revenge. I wanted to hurt the way I had been hurt. But instead, I chose to build something with all of you. And what we built, it's not just this building. It's a foundation for something real. Thank you, Elaine said, her voice steady, for refusing to destroy us, for choosing to rebuild us instead. Ryan spoke up. I'm sorry. Every day I'll probably be sorry for what I did, for keeping that secret. But I'm grateful that you gave me a way to understand why it mattered. And I'm grateful that you were willing to learn, that you chose growth over defensiveness. He looked at Elaine. And you had to face yourself. You had to stop running. That took courage. It's still taking courage, Elaine admitted. Every day. Yes, Marcus acknowledged. Healing always does. Sophie, watching her family speak these truths to each other, felt something settle in her chest. Her family wasn't perfect, they had been broken, but they were choosing actively and continuously to rebuild with honesty as their foundation. Can we promise something? That we always do this? Always tell each other the truth? Marcus looked at his wife, at his children, and nodded. Yes, he said, we can promise that. And though none of them knew what the future held, what new challenges might arise, what new tests of trust might come, they all understood that they had learned the most important lesson, that trust broken can be rebuilt, but only through sustained honesty, accountability, and the willingness to see those we love with compassion, even when they fail us. The community center that had started as a symbol of one family's crisis had become a symbol of their healing, and every person who walked through those doors would experience the care with which it had been built, not just in the physical structure, but in the commitment to integrity that had been poured into every corner. As they left the building that night, Marcus placed his hand on the wall of the entryway, the wall that his son had helped design, and he felt, for the first time since the discovery, something like peace. It wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one written with honesty, constructed with integrity, and illuminated by the hard-won light of a family that had chosen to rebuild together.